I guess I don't know how to. Zoom has updated its app, and now I don't know how to move the people to the side where they used to be. They're at the top. But I'm going to adjust and move on. Good evening, everybody. I can't see. It's not okay. I'm not going to move on. Hold on one second, y'all. I got to figure out how to be able to see the folks in the class. Hmm. Okay. Oh, view. Here it is. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry about that. I Zoom did an update and everything is in a different place now. And I wasn't going to be able to, I wasn't going to be okay if I couldn't see your faces. My name is Leah LaRue. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Planning Units for the City of Atlanta. I work in the Department of City Planning, and I'm very happy to be joined tonight by two of my coworkers. Ide Santana is our Program Development Manager,
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
and Tony McNeil is our Program Coordinator Senior for Outreach and Engagement.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And all three of us are filling in because it takes three people to do Samantha's job, but we're all filling in for Samantha Terry, who is our um, uh, NPU University Registrar and also the Program Coordinator Senior for Education and Training. Most of you on both sides, on the instructor side and on the student side, know Samantha. She does a great job coordinating our NPU University program. She is on vacation today, so she could not be here with us, but believe me when I tell you, I cannot wait for her to return to us next week. So welcome to NPU University. Welcome to Navigating Mortgage and Renter Challenges, a guide for Atlanta residents. If you are enrolled in our CPC program, that's our Citizen Planner Certificate program, you will want to note that this is CD 1003.002. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Quickly, I'll go over our classroom rules. If you are taking this class for credit, you'll definitely want to have your camera on so you can receive course credit. Please do keep your microphones muted. I'm sorry, I went a little out of order there, but please keep your microphone muted. This helps us cut down on background noise, especially when it's noise that you think other people can't hear. The Zoom technology picks up on everything and it interrupts an active microphone that is working at the same time. So please be sure to keep your microphone muted unless you've been called on to ask or answer a question. This is a good time to grab a pen and paper to keep notes with. If you're interested in taking notes, we will send out all course materials at the end of the class. I like to say this at the beginning of the class. If you see someone asking in the chat if we're going to send out the course materials, then you know that they were late to class or they weren't paying attention when I said, we will absolutely send you the course materials at the end of the class. But if you'd like to take your own notes, this is a good time to grab a pen and paper or a snack if you'd like to. Again, please keep your cameras turned on in order to receive course credit if you're enrolled in the Citizen Planner Certificate program. To ask a question during Q&A, you'll raise your hand to get in the queue. Please do not just unmute your mic and ask a question. Please raise your hand first and wait to be called on to ask that question or to respond to any other engagement from the instructors tonight. And of course, all questions must be relevant to course content. Quickly to show you how to raise your hand, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a button that says reactions. And if you click on that button, oh, it actually says react now. Sorry, I have a new thing, so we'll have to change this, the new Zoom. It says react and it has a little heart. So you'll click on that button Yours, if you don't have the update, yours may say reactions. It may still look like what's on the screen. As you see the pop-up, you'll see a button that says raise hand. You can click on that to raise your hand. If you haven't done it before, or if you'd like to test it out and make sure you know how to do it, you can go ahead and raise your hand now. We will ignore you, assuming that you're just testing it out. So don't worry about that. And last but not least, Ida, you can go ahead to the next slide, if you will. I would like to introduce your instructors for tonight. And of course, in doing so, I'd like to thank and appreciate our instructors from the Atlanta Legal Aid for being here with us tonight to help provide this information, this very valuable information to Atlantans. I want to point out that when we first did these courses, this housing security series, I think it was the year before last, the feedback from the students was it was overwhelming. The feedback was absolutely overwhelming. Everyone found those courses to be very helpful, very informative, and very timely. So I'm very excited that we're able to produce this class tonight. And I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Karen Brown, Margaret Keniar, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Maggie, and Nadine Lang. They will take it from here. Thank you all for being here tonight, and let's go.
Thank you, Leah. Let me this up real quick and oops. Okay, here we go. Sorry. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I am Maggie Kinnear. I'm a senior attorney with the Atlanta Legal Aid Society. I work in the downtown office. I also foster kittens, and I have a new kitten, so you may see him through this program. My apologies, or you're welcome, however you feel about that. Got a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as I can, so there'll be time for questions. But if you have a specific situation that you feel like you need to speak with an attorney about, please feel free to give us a call so we can have a more in-depth conversation with you. And here's just some information about Atlanta Legal Aid. It is 100 years old this year, so we're very excited, and here we are. Okay, so I represent tenants in usually in disputes with their landlords. So the main advice that I want to make sure everybody understands is pretty much on this page. Make sure that you pay your rent in full and on time every month, and make sure that you are keeping good records related to your tenancy, whether that's the copies of your proof of rent payment, whether that's just any documentation between you and your landlord, emails, text messages, make sure you're saving all of that. Georgia law does not allow tenants to withhold their rent, so please make sure that you're paying your rent or that you have documented your attempts to pay rent if the landlord isn't accepting it. Also, make sure that you are following the terms of your lease. If you have questions about what is in the lease, make sure you go and refer to it and read it. The landlord is just as bound to the lease as the tenant. It is the guidance for the entire tenancy. So the information in there is what is going to control and help hopefully answer your questions. The tenant does have the right to use and possess the property. The landlord may be property manager, or it may be, the homeowner, but they have given the tenant the right to use and possess the property during the course of the tenancy. The landlord has the right to come and enter the property to, do repairs and things like that, but they have only a limited right to do so. They don't have the right to be coming over all the time because the tenant does have the right to use and enjoy the property. The landlord also must go through a court process if they want to evict the tenant. I will go over what that process is in a few minutes. All right. As I said before, Georgia law considers the landlord's obligation to make repairs and the tenant's obligation to pay rent to be separate. So Georgia law tenants have to pay their rent. They cannot withhold their rent if the landlord has failed to make repairs. The landlord also cannot retaliate against the tenant for requesting repairs or reporting a need for repairs to code enforcement or some other agency that may be responsible for inspecting the property. So the landlord cannot refuse rent or raise rent or file an eviction because the tenant has requested that repairs be made. Landlord does have an obligation to maintain and repair the property. And under a new law that just passed and went into effect in July, landlords must provide a place that is fit for human habitation. This is for residential leases, but it must be fit for human habitation, which isn't defined in the law, but essentially means that human beings have to be able to live there. There needs to be utilities. There need to be, not full of mold or pests or things like that. It has to at least meet the bare minimum of housing codes so that someone could live in the property. If a landlord is not making repairs, tenants should make sure that they are giving notice to the landlord. That should be in writing, and they should keep a copy of that notice for their records. That could be an email. Like I said, it could be a text message as long as the text message is clear about what you're asking for. But it should be in some kind of writing so that you have a record of providing it to the landlord. And it should also, like I said, be clear about what needs to be repaired. And then the landlord and the tenant should work together if there needs to be someone coming to make those repairs so that they get made. If the repairs are not being made, if the landlord is not being responsive, Georgia law does allow tenants to do a repair and deduct or a repair and then file a small claims lawsuit to recover the costs of those repairs. You need to make sure that the landlord is on notice about what needs to be repaired and then give them a reasonable time to make those repairs. And if they don't, then they need to be on notice that the tenant is going to make the repairs themselves and either deduct from next month's rent or file a lawsuit to recover the costs of those repairs. And you need to keep all of your documentation regarding what you paid and who you paid so that you can show what those costs are that you're trying to recover. Repair and deduct should only be done for minor issues. It should not be, you shouldn't be replacing your HVAC unit or an appliance or something like that that's going to cost a lot of money. Those you could do something like if it's, if you don't have heat or air, you could contact housing code enforcement, or you could maybe just file a lawsuit against the landlord for damages related to the repair issues that weren't addressed, such as you had to go stay at a hotel or you had property that got damaged, things like that. All right, evictions. Okay, so I said before, evictions are a court process. They're required by Georgia law. Landlords have to go through a court process to evict their tenant. They cannot just put the tenant out without a court order and a marshal there to enforce the writ of possession. They can't change the locks, put the tenant out, anything like that. Have to go through the court process. Once something has been filed with the court, you need to consider the court a party to the case, meaning if you and your landlord come to a resolution, that's great. Glad you were able to work it out, but you need to make sure the court knows about it. So something has to be filed with the court to let them know, hey, we've reached an agreement, or this case is being dismissed, or I've paid everything and they're not going to move forward with the case anymore. Court has to be informed just to make sure everybody's rights are protected. Georgia law does require that landlords demand possession of the property prior to filing an eviction. Until recently, that was as simple as the landlord could just say, get out. And if the tenant didn't immediately move out, the landlord could go and file an eviction. There has now been a change in the law, which again took effect on July 1st of this year, that if the eviction is being filed for non-payment, then this demand for possession must be in writing, and it must give the tenant at least 3 business days to pay the balance due before an eviction case can be filed. So the law now requires that there be an opportunity for the tenant to cure the situation, make the payment before anything gets filed with the court. If after those 3 business days, once that notice is given, the tenant still hasn't paid, then the landlord can proceed with filing the eviction case. Evictions can also be filed for any other breach of the lease. Most of them are filed for non-payment, but they could be filed for any other term of the lease that the landlord believes has been violated. They must be filed in the county where the property is located. So if you're renting property in Fulton County, the eviction case should be filed in Fulton County. And it is an expedited process. These are probably the fastest moving cases in any kind of case in court. Most of the time, there are obviously like anomalies, but most of the time it's about 1 to 2 months, which is really fast for a court case. Once the case is filed in the court by the landlord, it will be served by either a marshal or a process server. They can hand it to you, or they can serve you by what's called tack and mail. That's where they tack a copy to the door and then they mail a copy. It needs to be mailed the same day that it's tacked. So if you think there was an issue with the mailing, you need to save the envelope to show that it was mailed on the wrong day. You can challenge service when you file your answer. The answer is due 7 days from the date of service. The answer date should be listed on the bottom of the service copy. So if there's a question, refer to that. But generally, 7 days from the date that you are served, you need to make sure that you have filed an answer with the court. And the address and everything for the court should be listed on the eviction warrant that you were served with. If no answer is filed, a default judgment will automatically be entered against the tenant. You can ask the court to reopen a default, and you need to provide them with an explanation for why the answer wasn't filed. The court has discretion whether or not to reopen that, but there's no way to appeal. And if the court decides that they're not going to reopen the case, then you are just stuck with the default, which definitely will let the landlord move forward with an eviction, may or may not also grant them a money judgment. Assuming an answer is filed, the court will schedule a hearing. In some counties, that hearing will be scheduled as soon as you file the answer. They'll tell you your hearing date and time at that point. In other counties, it may be a little bit longer before there's a hearing. In Fulton these days, it's generally running about 30 days from when the answer is filed. So they may or may not tell you when you file the answer, but they will mail a notice to you in the mail. You can also sign up to get notification by email. That's an extra step you have to take, but they will definitely send you a notice in the mail. When you go to the hearing, you may have an opportunity to go to mediation. That's where you and the landlord either go out into the hallway or go into a side room. There may or may not be a neutral mediator who works for the court there to kind of help you try to resolve things, or the court may just ask you to step out into the hall and kind of talk to each other, see if you can resolve the case. If the case gets resolved in mediation, you need to make sure everything you agree to is written down in that agreement before you sign it. Once it's signed, that is the binding agreement. So anything you talked about that didn't make it into that agreement is not part of the settlement. Whatever is in writing is what is part of the settlement, and it is binding. There's no going back to the court to try to change it. So you need to make sure that you can live with the terms as they are written in that agreement. If you don't resolve the case in mediation, there will be a hearing. The landlord will present their case first, and then the tenant will have an opportunity to respond and present their case. You can present documents, you can show rent receipts, you can have a witness there to talk about what they saw themselves, about what happened. And then the judge will make a decision when everyone is finished presenting their case. The judge may tell you orally what their decision is, or they may take it under advisement. Either way, there will be a written decision after the court is done. If the court decides against the tenant, a writ of possession will issue 7 days from the date of court. Sorry, I'll get to that in a minute, I guess. Kind of going back a little. If the tenant doesn't appear in court, there will be a default judgment that will be entered automatically. If the landlord doesn't appear, the case will be dismissed. If the tenant has brought counterclaims in their answer, the tenant can move forward with those counterclaims if they choose, or they can voluntarily dismiss them. If it takes longer than a couple of weeks for there to be a hearing from the date the answer is filed, the landlord can ask that the tenant be required to pay rent into the registry of the court. Generally, this doesn't usually happen because usually the hearings are happening pretty quickly from when the answer is filed. But the tenant also cannot just go in and ask to pay rent. It has to be something that the landlord initiates, and then the court orders it. But just be aware of that if you're in a county where it's taking a little longer to get a hearing. Okay. Like I said, if the judge decides against the tenant, then there will be 7 days before the writ of possession issues. The writ of possession is what allows the landlord to actually move forward with an eviction. During that time, the tenant has the right to file an appeal, which is now called a petition for review. That has to be filed within that 7 days. There are court costs associated with filing an appeal, but you could ask the court for those to be waived by submitting what's called a pauper's affidavit, and then you may have to go and talk to a judge about all of that to ask that it be waived. And you also need to, once the appeal is filed, serve the other party. You can do that by mailing a copy of the petition for review to them. Under Georgia law, once the case is being appealed, rent automatically has to be paid into court while the case is pending on appeal. So while it's still in the initial trial stage, the landlord has to ask that rent be paid into court. Once we're talking about an appeal, automatically has to happen. So all past due rent has to be due within that 7 days, has to be paid into court within the 7 days, the period to file the appeal. After that, each month, usually by the 5th day of the month, that month's rent has to be paid into court. If the rent isn't paid, the landlord can get a writ of possession to move forward with an eviction, even though the case is still pending on appeal. Like I said, the landlord is required to get the writ of possession. There's a request that they can file with the court. If the case isn't on appeal and all of the documentation shows that they're allowed to get the writ of possession, the court will grant it. And then the landlord can coordinate with the marshals or with other authorized law enforcement to actually come out and evict the tenant. So once the writ of possession has issued, generally speaking, there's no way to know when the eviction will happen. The marshals usually don't tell you the exact date. Landlords probably won't tell you the exact date. So if you know that a writ of possession has issued, or you believe that one has issued, you want to make sure that any important papers, any medications, any items of value are out of the property and somewhere where they'll be safe and secure. And you want to try to make sure that you and your family are out of the property and somewhere where you can be not there when the eviction happens. Okay. Make sure we're good on time. All right. When you're moving out of the property, make sure that you give proper notice to the landlord. Most leases require either a 30 or 60-day notice. It should be in writing, and you should keep a copy for yourself. You want to make sure that you have that just in case there's an issue later on, but also to make sure that you're following the terms of the lease so you don't end up possibly being obligated to pay rent for an extra month. Once you've moved out, make sure that you have a record of what the property looked like when you left it. That could be a move-out inspection that you do with the landlord. It could be pictures and videos that you take of the property as you're leaving. You also want to make sure that you return the keys, and you should document that the keys were returned. So like take a picture or whatever it is showing that you've turned in the keys to the landlord, and have like a record of the date and all of that. So it's clear when you return possession of the property. Landlord has 30 days from when you return possession of the property to either return your security deposit, return part of the security deposit with an explanation about why the rest of it was deducted and not returned to you, or keep all of the deposit and again provide an explanation for why the deposit was kept. If you receive part of the deposit and you cash the check or you keep the money, you cannot challenge the decision to keep the other part of your deposit. Under Georgia law, you're basically, by accepting the funds that they are sending to you, you are deemed to have agreed with their decision. So just be aware of that. And if you want to dispute, you cannot keep the money that they gave you. Okay, we got 5 minutes. Deposits can be kept for damage beyond normal wear and tear, or if there is other money owed to the landlord. A new law that just passed and took effect on July 1st now states that the deposit when you move in cannot be more than like 2 times the monthly rent amount. That's the maximum amount the deposit could be. Okay, I know that was a lot of information in a short time. I think I have a couple minutes for questions, and then we're going to also try to have time for questions at the end. But this is contact information if you want to talk to someone at Atlanta Legal Aid about your tenant issues. There's also georgialegalaid.org, which has general information about well, landlord-tenant issues, but also a variety of legal issues.
Great.
So thank you
Maggie,
all. Thank
oops,
you all very
sorry.
much. Hmm?
Maggie, there was a question that came in,
Okay.
direct message to me, and I'm not sure that which part it's referring to, but the question is, does the 3-day notice need to be certified? And that's from Sopan Kumar.
Okay. No, it doesn't. It needs to be in writing, but it doesn't need to be certified.
Okay, great. And then we have Mr. Williams has his hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So my question is around the eviction process. Once that, like, say for the mail intact, if it is not served correctly, then what happens? Is that
If
just a small administrative error, or do they have
if
to read?
it's not served correctly, you still file an answer, and you need to say in your answer that service was not done properly. You can provide additional information if you want. You can say, it was tacked on my neighbor's door, or it was, whatever the issue is, but so you still need to file an answer, and you need to ask that you need to inform the court, and then the court will either say, if they agree that service wasn't proper, the court could either dismiss the case and make them start all over, or the court could say, we're going to give them an opportunity to reserve you and do it properly.
Okay. That was my only question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think I will now turn it over to my wonderful colleagues.
Ms. Nadine, if you're speaking, we can't hear. You're still on mute for us.
Mute.
There
So I
you
do apologize for that. I am Nadine L. Lang, and I work for Atlanta Legal Aid as the housing counselor. I work with the attorneys, and what I do is talk about money. And so the one thing I wanted to share with each one of you is such an important fact. I learned this many, many years ago, and I think it's so important to understand this. It's not how much money you make, it's how you manage what you make. And so we need to keep that statement in mind, because the truth of the matter is, if we focus on buying a certain home, or Meg, if we focus on having a certain rental payment and we don't have that money in our pocket, then we have a problem. So I just want to share some things with you. There are four things that you can do with money, only four. And they are the four S's of money. You can secure it, meaning you earn it. You can share it. And for those that have religious obligations, we're talking about tithes and offerings and giving it to your religious institution. The third thing you can do with money is save it. You should always give yourself 10% of what you make. Um, who else would do it? And then the fourth thing, which most people do right after they secure it, is they spend it. And so we should let spending be our very last thing that we do with our money. We really should think about and plan out how we're going to spend our money. Um, when it comes to preparing for our financial dark places, and we all have those at different times in life, there are about well, actually, it's about 6 steps to take, 7 steps, yay, seven, to take in order to get back on your feet. But before you take those steps, let me remind you to know your financial personality. So I want us to just stop for just about 3 minutes. And I'd like for you to look at some shapes and look at what you think the shape may mean when it comes to your finances, and choose what shape um, fits you. Does the square fit you? Does the circle fit you? Does the triangle fit you? Does the rectangle fit you? Does the squiggle fit you? Now, I won't tell you what they mean until we just for a few minutes. I want you just to think about it. So write down what you think fits your personality the most when you look at those shapes. Because as a housing counselor, when I'm talking to a client, the first thing I do is try to really think about what type of financial personality they have. Because if they have a certain personality, there are things that I know won't work for them. So let's think about it. Let me give you about 2 minutes. I'll be quiet just for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Ms. Nadine, in the meantime, the gray blocks are still blocking part of your slides on there.
Okay. Do you see it now?
One is gone. There's still one across the top, it looks like. Or maybe there's two across the top. I can't.
Are they go now?
No, they've moved up. There's one still across the top and one in the bottom right.
So is it blocking anything?
Now it's not blocking anything.
Okay.
I think we can still see. Yeah.
Okay. So turn on your mics. Are you have you figured out your or think you figured out your financial personality? Do I have one person that would like to share? What do you think your financial personality is?
Mm,
Now, if I call on somebody, Mr. Lee, I may call on you since you're smiling.
sure.
Or Miss Lee.
I think I am very squiggly.
Thank you for being so honest. Let me get one more person. Who else?
In the chat, Miss Carson says that she thinks she's a circle.
She thinks she's a circle. Sounds good. So let's look at each one of them. I do want to remind you that no personality, financial personality, is wrong. But you have to keep in mind that if your budget doesn't fit these personalities, then there is a problem. Miss Lee, you said squiggle. I will go to the squiggle at the very end. Let's go with the square. The square says, I have a budget and I stick to it no matter what. If I have a problem with my water spewing out the back, I'm sticking with that budget and I'll just float away. You see, it's nothing wrong with sticking to a budget, sticking to that budget, but we need to think about what else is needed. Here's the circle. The circle says my focus is on people and not what is in my pocket. Who said that they were a circle?
That was me, Kayla.
Okay, Kayla, do you find yourself being like that where, you know, you're the person at the office that always wants to have a party for somebody? They broke their toe. Let's celebrate. Let's do something for her. Is that you? You think that's you?
That does resonate with me a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I am like very close with my family, so I might have $30 in my pocket, and if my sister tells me like she needs uniforms for her kids or she needs help with something, like I'll send her 50, you know? So it does
That
resonate with me to a degree.
Kayla, you are a circle. Here's the good thing about circles. You'll never, whoever's around them will never go without. Now, Kayla will, but you won't. So let's just keep that in mind. Here, I wonder if anybody knows what the triangle. I want to get rich quick. So I'm doing everything I possibly can to get rich quick. Does that sound like anybody? I'm not trying to be a feminist, but most men, when they're talking about pyramids or the triangle personality, that's what most men fall in. Not all men, but most men. Most of the time, when I'm talking about a triangle personality, when I meet that person, it's usually a male. Here is a rectangle. Anybody call themselves a rectangle? Felt like they were a rectangle? Okay. So a rectangle is I have a budget, but when a special need arises, I can rearrange my budget to take care of that need. I'm willing to move things around, shuffle things around. And if you look at a rectangle, look what shape it looks like. What shape does it look like? A dollar bill. And so, Miss Lee, thank you for saying that you are a squiggle because most people fall in this category. A squiggle is a person that says, what's the budget now? Tell me. I spend what I want, when I want, and how I want. I'll figure out my necessary financial obligations later. But right now, I'm going to make myself happy. So I just wanted to share that with you, because when we're talking about coming up with coming up with a budget, we need to know our personality. Thank you, Demetrius, for sharing that you are a rectangle. Thank you so very much. We do need to know what our personalities are, because when you come to the housing counselor, and that's the first thing I would recommend. Don't wait till you're 1 month behind, or wait till you're 2 or 3 months behind. If you have a rental bill that is coming due and you know you can't afford it, or if you have a mortgage that's coming due, the first thing you need to do is relax, cease from panicking, remember who you are, and start putting a plan together. And the way to put that plan together is, number one, know your financial personality, but number two, seek free budget counseling. Now, I put up two numbers for you, 1-800-569-4287. And this is HUD's financial free budget counseling uh, list of agencies that will actually provide that. They can provide rental budgeting, rental counseling, as well as mortgage counseling. So when you find yourself in that situation, don't wait till you get 1 month out. If you know that next month you will not be able to handle your finances because something has happened, get in touch with a housing counselor. Now, one thing I will say is that try your best to make sure that housing counselor is attached to something like Atlanta Legal Aid. Many counselors will refer you to a legal aid agency if they can't handle things. But it's great to know that you can find a legal counselor, uh, an attorney that's willing to work with you. Number three, create an emergency budget. This is the type of budget that will see you through crisis. All it means is that decide what's important, what you can live with, and what you cannot live with. When I meet with clients, the first thing I ask this question all the time, and I'm always surprised at what is essential to them and what's important. So here's my question. What are you willing? What are you willing not to give up? And you would be surprised at some of the answers I get. I get things like, I'm not willing to give up my cable bill. I'm not, one lady told me, I'm not willing to give up my friend. I help her all the time. When I buy something, when I buy me something, I buy her something. So when you know what you're not willing to give up, we try to work around lifestyle choices. And then once we recognize that lifestyle choices has to change, then we start looking at, okay, let's add up your monthly cost of your priority expenses. You say you're not willing to give up this. Let's look at your net income, because how many of you know you cannot spend gross anywhere? You've got to spend only that net income. And here is the thing. If your outflow exceeds your income, then your upkeep becomes your downfall. And so you have to start thinking, what am I willing to give up that will keep a shelter, a roof over my home, food in my stomach, and keep my family warm and dry until we can do better. And so those are the things that you have to think about. Then you have to, step number 5, you got to start to investigate options. Here's one option: increase my income. Here's another option: decrease my expenses. What to keep, what to lower, what to get rid of. I may have to get rid of a cable bill. Now, I bring up cable because cable is becoming very, very expensive. I may have to go to a cheaper phone service. There are a lot of things that you have to start thinking about. Here's step number 6, time to reassess. I've given up all that I can give up. I've taken on another job and things are not working out. Then what I need to do is go back to that emergency budget and say, Lord, what can I give up? What, how do I need to, how can I work with this? It might be a legal issue, but it might not be. It might be you're living above your means. So you use the resources that are around you, like your family. How can I stay here, or would you be willing? I talked to a lady the other day and found someone that would be willing to live with her for $600 a month. And I'm doing her budget. And I say, you're still $75 short. She said, I can make it on short being 75, but that's not true. Let's figure out what you can give up even more so until you get through this crisis. The next thing and the very last thing I will say is always pay yourself, even in a crisis mode. Pay yourself. Pay yourself no more than $10 to $15 a pay period. The one thing that I did a long time ago, and I've been working for Atlanta Legal Aid for some time now, but before I came to Atlanta Legal Aid, I worked in corporate America. Every pay raise that I received, I never spent. I actually put it aside. So if they gave me a pay raise, and y'all know sometimes we get a pay raise, and when we look at our check, it's no more than $30 after taxes and all of that. But I never would spend that. And so I've been working now for about 40 years. Can you imagine what it would look like if you never spend your pay raise? And so here's something to think about. What if you had a penny and you doubled it every day? If I gave you one penny and you were able to double it every day, what do you think? How much do you think for the next 30 days, if you had a penny and you were able to double it every day, how much do you think you would have saved? Anybody? It's not a trick question.
I put in the chat $100.
$100. Who is that, Kayla? If you
Yes,
could
ma'am.
double a penny every day. Now, sometimes that's kind of impossible to do right now. But if you could double a penny every day for 30 days, here's what I want to show you. Anybody else? Kayla said $100. Can we say maybe $200? Somebody's close to 300? Okay, somebody thinks it's a trick question. Here's the thing, if you could save a penny every day, double a penny every day. Kayla, you were somewhat close.
I was really far.
Well, no, you were somewhat close. You would have saved $5,368,709.12. All I'm saying to you is that over a lifetime, it's never too late to start saving. Treat yourself. Bless yourself. Make sure that you put money aside for you. And I think that is the thing that we don't do well. We don't set money aside for us. We spend so much money on things that will deteriorate and go away, that it's really unbelievable. We'll save up for a car, and then when we purchase the car, we go to another savings. But have you ever thought about, okay, I'm saving up for a car, or I'm buying a car and I'm spending $350 or $400 a month. The car is paid for, and I still put that $350 to $400 a month aside. Can you imagine doing that for just 5 years or just 3 years? That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just adding money on money. So when crises do happen, you have money to work with. I'll save time if you have questions. Let me see. I'll save time at the end of our session so that we can keep moving on. Anybody have any questions before I end? I think I'm done. And Miss Karen, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay,
you.
Dr. Brown, here we go.
Thank you, Nadine, and good evening, everybody. And it's great to see all of you on Zoom. Thank you for your attention this evening. So you've heard from Maggie Kinnear talk about tenants' rights issues, the legal process for tenants, various legal issues arising for tenants. You've heard Nadine talk about budgeting issues. And so at this time, we're going to turn to issues that affect homeowners. So my name is Karen Brown, and I'm the Director and Managing Attorney of the Home Defense Program of Atlanta Legal Aid. We are a specialized unit of an Atlanta Legal Aid that helps people who are low and moderate income homeowners. And Nadine, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Low and moderate income homeowners who might be at risk of losing their homes. They may be behind on their mortgage payments. They may be facing foreclosure. Unfortunately, sometimes people come to us after they've already been foreclosed on, but we take people at all stages. We give legal advice at all stages. Folks may have been subjected to what we call predatory mortgage lending or servicing practices. They may have been wrongly denied mortgage assistance program or loan modifications or other foreclosure prevention programs. Or they may have been targeted and fallen prey to either home purchase scams. They're in the process of trying to buy a home and they've been scammed, or they own their home and have a lot of equity in it and they've been targeted for title theft or equity theft. So those are all the kinds of cases, or broad range of cases impacting homeowners that we cover. All right, next slide, please. Our clients reside in the 5-county metro Atlanta area. Of course, this is the area that Atlanta Legal Aid covers. And for those who live in the city of Atlanta, of course, it's either Fulton or DeKalb. But a lot of our clients are longtime homeowners. They might be longtime homeowners who are elderly and or disabled. They're living on modest Social Security retirement income or disability income. But we also have people who are not longtime homeowners or who've purchased in recent years. But regardless of when they've purchased, they may be not elderly or disabled, living on limited income, but they're working, but they've experienced layoffs or reduced hours or just low wages, and they're struggling with their mortgages. Next slide, please. So we're going to cover in this session the legal process for foreclosures in Georgia, both that covers state law, Georgia law, and also federal law protections. We're going to talk about various workout options that may be available for a homeowner who is struggling with their mortgage, depending on what kind of mortgage they have. We're going to talk about the Homeowner Assistance Fund, which is a mortgage assistance program run by the state of Georgia, Department of Community Affairs. We're also going to talk about the DeKalb Mortgage Assistance Program. I'm not aware that Fulton has one, but DeKalb does. And if a homeowner lives in the city of Atlanta, DeKalb County, and they qualify for this program, they can have access to mortgage assistance. And we're also just going to talk about practical tips for protecting your home from, a variety of these scams. All right, next slide, please. So the foreclosure process in Georgia is a non-judicial foreclosure process. About half the states in the country have a judicial process for foreclosure, which means that the bank or mortgage company has to first file a lawsuit in court and get permission from a judge before they can foreclose on someone. In the other half of the states, including Georgia, there's a non-judicial foreclosure process. The banks don't have to file a lawsuit. And the process involves certain notices that are required. For example, there's what we call a 30-day letter. The mortgage servicers are required to send, and they typically send this through a law firm that is hired by the mortgage company, a letter that must be sent no less than 30 days prior to the scheduled foreclosure sale. They're also required to do another notice, and that is a legal advertisement that is placed in the local legal newspaper once a week, 4 weeks in a row prior to the scheduled foreclosure sale. Well, when do foreclosure sales happen? Are they just any day? No, they occur on only one day a month. And that's the first Tuesday of each month. And where do they occur? On the courthouse steps. So here we are, it's the end of August, and we're approaching Labor Day weekend. And Tuesday is the first Tuesday of September, first Tuesday of the month. So guess what? A lot of people are facing foreclosure on Tuesday. So anyway, there's not a lawsuit that's required, but there are these notices required. Now, because City of Atlanta covers, you could be in Fulton County or DeKalb County, you need to know what legal organ am I talking about. And for Fulton, it used to be the Daily Report, but now it's called this different newspaper called the South Fulton Neighbor. And then if you live in DeKalb, that legal advertisement would be running in the DeKalb Champion. Now, so I've kind of given you an idea of how it works and when it works, and what are the notice requirements. And it used to be, before federal law changed in 2010, it used to be that as soon as someone defaulted on a mortgage payment, then the mortgage company can just start that foreclosure process. So Georgia is a fast foreclosure process state. However, thankfully, under federal law, there's a rule that says they cannot initiate that foreclosure process until the person is at least 120 days delinquent. So there is some kind of better time frame now before someone's actually going to be put into that foreclosure process with these federal law protections. All right, next slide. So if someone's struggling with their mortgage, and let me just say this, everybody struggles. Everybody at some point in our lives, and maybe more often than others, but at some point are going to face a financial hardship. And, as Nadine mentioned earlier, it's really important to start working on that solution before you fall behind. I mean, maybe you don't know that you're going to fall behind, but because something just happens. But, planning ahead, working on your budget ahead when things are going well, putting aside savings, setting aside money for a rainy day, for that emergency situation. But when you're in that crisis, you start falling behind, as Nadine mentioned, prioritize the mortgage payments. Try to cut out any unnecessary expenses. And if possible, if there's a way to increase the household income, work on that as well. Also, we strongly encourage you to contact a nonprofit HUD-certified housing counseling agency. And Nadine provided a phone number, and I'm going to provide a website at the end of these slides, where you can find a nonprofit HUD-certified housing counseling agency. And of course, at Atlanta Legal Aid, we have housing counselors on staff, and you can get free help from a housing counselor. Also, we encourage folks to contact the mortgage company. There are different kinds of workout options, which I'm going to go over in a few minutes. You can apply for a forbearance, a repayment plan, a deferral, or a loan modification. And when you're in communication with your mortgage company about your particular situation, we advise keep good records of those communications, keep all the letters you're receiving from the mortgage company, keep copies of the letters you send, any faxes that you're sending, any emails that are going back and forth. That's all very important, because if you need to talk with a housing counselor or you need to talk with a lawyer about your situation, then you'll have a good record that you can then share with us so that we can have a good idea of what's already transpired, so we can then advise you properly. The other thing we advise, if you're struggling with your mortgage payments, please open all of your mail. I know that there's this tendency, and I certainly understand it. If I'm in crisis, I don't want to open the mail. It's just going to be bad news. I don't want to open it. I want to bury my head in the sand. It's just, it's an avoidance technique, right? But it's really not helpful. We encourage you, open all your mail from the mortgage company, from the law firm hired by the mortgage company. And it's important when you come to us for us to be able to read that. It's better to know what they're saying so that then you can take appropriate next steps. And so we can advise you about appropriate next steps. Please open your mail. All right, next slide, please. So how do you know if you're facing foreclosure? Maybe you know you're behind on your mortgage payments, but you don't know if you're facing foreclosure. So one thing, of course, is to be on the lookout for that foreclosure letter that's going to be sent by the law firm. All right. Remember, I mentioned a few slides ago that Georgia requires that the letter be sent no less than 30 days prior to the scheduled foreclosure sale. Guess what? Georgia law does not require that you receive that letter. It only requires that it be sent. And we all know that there are problems with U.S. mail, unfortunately. So, be on the lookout for that letter, but you might not get it. So, and if you don't get it, doesn't matter under the law. So that's very frustrating, but that is Georgia law. It's important to know that. Now, what else? What other ways might you know that you're scheduled for a foreclosure sale? Well, another thing that's happening is that, as I mentioned, the legal ads are running in the local legal newspapers. And guess who's reading those ads? Well, scammers, also bankruptcy lawyers and investors, and they're reading them because they're looking at it for an opportunity. Some, of course, with nefarious intentions, and then they're going to start sending solicitation letters to you, the homeowner. So you're going to be getting all this other mail or flyers or phone calls or emails or text. They're trying to figure out how to contact you and how to approach you and, how to get your attention. Again, oftentimes with nefarious intentions. But that's another way you'll know if you're scheduled for foreclosure. All right, there's also another website that we look at. It's called georgiapublicnotice.com, and it has the legal ads for, I think, almost every county in Georgia, but certainly for the 5 counties in the metro Atlanta area. And you can just do a search there for the name, the last name of the person or first name of the person or the street address or the street number or some way to do a search to see, am I scheduled for foreclosure? And if you are, the legal ad should be there and you can pull it up and see that. Now, as I mentioned, the legal ads also run in the local legal newspapers. Most of us don't read those newspapers. But the law says this is where they're required to put them. But if you wanted to check, you can go pull those newspapers and look to see, is my name somewhere in here? Is my property address somewhere in here? Now, this is just a little tip here. We advise check in more than one place because it should be in one of these local legal newspapers, depending on what county you live in, if you're facing foreclosure. But if it's not, it doesn't mean that you're not scheduled for foreclosure. There could be some mix-up. And maybe it's in the newspaper, but not at georgiapublicnotice.com. Maybe they haven't pulled it all. So just because it's not in one place doesn't mean that the foreclosure sale isn't scheduled. So it's important to check in several places. All right, next slide, please. So someone's facing foreclosure. What are the ways to potentially stop a foreclosure sale? And some of these are obvious, but I want to talk about each just so that you have an idea about what are those options. And so they might be obvious. Some might be financially feasible. Some might not be. So of course, the first is to pay up the mortgage arrears. So that's a way to stop the foreclosure, is just to pay up what's owed. And then another option is, and most of us don't have it, of course, and that's why we're facing foreclosure. But sometimes you might be able to come up with those funds, and you're able to catch it up. So another option, of course, is to enter into some kind of workout plan with the mortgage company. And it might be a forbearance, again, a deferral, repayment plan, loan modification, the Georgia Homeowner Assistance Fund, or the DeKalb Mortgage Assistance Program. And I'm going to talk about those options in a minute. So you can enter into some kind of workout plan that can stop the foreclosure sale. Another option in theory is to refinance. Now, if you're facing foreclosure, that means you're likely in default on the mortgage. It's going to be hard to refinance with a different mortgage company and get a good mortgage and not be gouged with high interest rate and high points and fees, because they see that you're behind. So that's not always, a viable option. But for seniors who are age 62 or older, we might advise considering the possibility of a reverse mortgage for seniors that would pay off the existing mortgage. And with the reverse mortgage, the senior does not have to pay, the senior still owns the home, doesn't have to pay a monthly mortgage payment, but they do have to pay annual property taxes and homeowners insurance. There are high closing costs involved. There are pros and cons to reverse mortgages, but it's something to consider, especially if the person's at risk of losing their home. Another option is to sell the home. Most people want to keep their home and stay in the home. But if you know that a foreclosure sale is coming down the road, hopefully not within 30 days, but hopefully later, and you've got time and you've really explored all of these various options and none of them are viable, then we strongly encourage folks to just sell the home and put it on the market, hire a licensed real estate agent, do a full sale, which means sell it for full fair market value so that, you pay off the mortgage and any equity, any proceeds go into your pocket, not to the mortgage company, not to some scammer, but go into your pocket. So definitely that's a way to stop a foreclosure sale that's in the future. If you're facing foreclosure on Tuesday, for example, you're not going to be able to sell for full market value. There's just not time. And people who are looking potentially to buy are just going to, gouge you. They're going to lowball you. They're going to say, what, you're facing foreclosure? I'm not going to buy it for full fair market value. I'm going to, offer a lot less. So you don't want to do it in that situation. Other options to potentially stop a foreclosure sale, of course, well, you can file a lawsuit, but you've got to have legal claims. You have to have good, viable legal claims, and you just don't file a lawsuit. That doesn't stop a foreclosure sale. You have to also ask the judge to issue what we call a temporary restraining order that would order the mortgage company not to foreclose. So that's a lot of work between now and foreclosure day to file a lawsuit, have viable legal claims, and get a temporary restraining order from a judge. But it is a potential way to stop a foreclosure sale. Another option that a lot of people use, but a lot of us don't like the idea of, but it is a viable legal way to stop a foreclosure sale, is to file for bankruptcy protection. If you file for bankruptcy protection prior to the scheduled foreclosure sale date, then that automatically stops the foreclosure from happening. And while you're in bankruptcy, you can, figure out what are your options. And there are different kinds of bankruptcies that you can file. Chapter 13 involves a repayment plan. You've got to pay your regular mortgage going forward and also another amount to pay off the mortgage arrears over time. It could be, a 3 or 5 year plan to pay that off. You can see that you still have to have sufficient income to do that. But it's one potential option. You can also apply for a loan modification while you're in bankruptcy. You could also apply for one of these mortgage assistance programs while you're in bankruptcy. So if these other options aren't viable, you can file bankruptcy and use that as a time to try to enter into some kind of workout. All right, next slide, please. Thank you, Nadine. If someone's facing foreclosure and if they are able to pay up the arrears, or they're able to enter into some kind of workout plan with their mortgage company, or maybe they're approved for the Georgia Homeowner Assistance Fund or the DeKalb Mortgage Assistance Program, or they've been in communication with the mortgage company, and the mortgage company says, yes, based on your situation, we're agreeing to stop the foreclosure sale. Then if it's any of those situations, our advice is get written confirmation that that foreclosure sale scheduled for Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024 has been canceled. Very important to get written confirmation from the law firm that's handling the foreclosure sale, or the mortgage company, or both, really. So that's really important. You don't want to be in a situation, and we've seen this, where, well, they told me that they were stopping it, and they told me we're going to do some kind of workout plan. Well, yeah, and then they foreclose, and then later, and then you're, in the process of being evicted after a foreclosure sale, and you say, well, they told me. Well, you go in front of a judge with that kind of argument, the judge is going to say, well, who told you? Did you get it in writing? So much, much better. And it's critical to get that confirmation that the foreclosure sale has been canceled, get that in writing. Next slide, please. So let's go back and talk about those workout options that I mentioned. So what's a forbearance? So a forbearance is a temporary pause in the mortgage payments, excuse me. And either the mortgage company will say, you don't have to make a payment, or you have to make a payment and it's a reduced payment amount for a certain period of time. It might be a month, it might be 2 months, it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months, it might be up to 12 months. During COVID, under certain federal protections, they were providing for forbearances up to 18 months or sometimes longer. So it's a pause in the mortgage payments. And they are not supposed to charge late fees during that period or penalties, but interest is going to continue to accrue on the outstanding mortgage balance. And those missed payments are still going to be owed. When there's a forbearance, it's not that they're forgiving those payments. They're just pausing them. They're just saying you have these certain months where you don't have to pay them. Now, when the forbearance period expires, when it ends, then you're going to need to be talking with the mortgage company about, well, is there going to be a possible extension of the forbearance period, or now my situation has improved, my financial situation has improved. What are my options and you've got to pay off those arrears and of course pay the mortgage payments going forward. So a forbearance is one kind of workout option, but obviously it's a temporary option. So another option is a repayment plan. So maybe I've lost my job, but now I've gotten another job and I can pay the mortgage payments going forward. And they may say, well, you got to pay those arrears, and they may require that over several months, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. So you'd have to pay your regular mortgage payment plus another amount to pay off those mortgage arrears. So that's a repayment plan. And not all of us, have better income that will allow for that, but some people may be able to do that. Another potential option is a deferral, which means, I've gone through this forbearance period. I don't have the lump sum amount to catch up my mortgage arrears, but I can pay going forward. And if you can afford the payments going forward, but can't pay the arrears, you want to ask for a deferral where the mortgage company will tack the arrears onto the back end of the loan. So it will be due when your loan matures, or if you sell or refinance before that, and it's non-interest bearing. You don't have to make payments on those arrears that have been deferred to the back end of the loan. So it's another potential option. And that would apply to someone who can pay the regular mortgage payments going forward. Now, the last option I'm going to talk about is a loan modification. And with a loan modification, the mortgage arrears, or the accrued interest, I should say, will be capitalized, will be added to the outstanding principal balance. And depending on what kind of loan is at issue, is it FHA, is it VA, is it Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac? What is the current interest rate on the current loan? What are the market interest rates? So it depends on all of these things. They may use the same interest rate or a market interest rate, and then they may use the same term, whatever term you have left on your existing mortgage, or they may offer a new 30 or 40-year term. And so your loan is modified. and you're going to have a new payment. And what should happen is that the payments will be reduced. That's the goal of this. So if you can pay the regular mortgage payments, then a deferral makes sense. If you can't, and if you need payment reduction, then a loan modification ideally would result in a payment reduction, but it doesn't always, depending on what all these terms are. All right, next slide, please. So, you know, mortgage companies don't always do the right thing. Imagine that. I've seen a few of these situations. Nadine has too. And so if you're in a dispute with a mortgage company, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing under federal rules, under the rules that apply to the particular mortgage you have, you can file a complaint with the federal agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I have the website here. There's a place where you can file complaints against that entity on that website. If you have an FHA loan, you can call what's called the HUD National Servicing Center at this phone number to try to address whatever the problem is. The mortgage company is not offering the proper loss mitigation under FHA rules, then you can call and try to get this addressed. Another thing is just to appeal or escalate with the mortgage servicer you're dealing with. And again, I mentioned this earlier, if you're in communications, do it in writing. And then if the mortgage company is turning you down for something, there might be appeal deadlines. And so make sure that you're reading carefully for whatever those appeal deadlines are, and that you're submitting any kind of appeal or escalation within that time period, and keep good records. All right, next slide, please. And of course, we do this all the time. And then there's another procedure that's provided for under federal law, under the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And they're called qualified written request, or requests for information, or notices of error. If you're seeking information or you need to, address an error that the mortgage servicer has committed, then you need to send one of these letters. Or if you're doing both, you can combine both the request for information and notice of error into one letter. So consider sending that as a way of trying to address the problem. Now, if you're going to do that, you may need to make sure that your letter has your name, your address, the mortgage loan account number, and then it's also an explain whatever the problem is, so that they understand what the problem is, and hopefully so they can address it. It's critical that it be sent to the proper address. You may look on your mortgage statement and say, oh, well, I'll just send it to this address. Or you may look on the website, I'll just send it to this address. And under federal law, if it's not sent to the right address, they don't have to respond to it. You want them to respond. So it's important to send it to the right address. Now, it's not just any address, it's the address that is specially designated as their address for receiving information requests and error notices. If you don't send it to the right address, they don't have to respond. So make sure you send it to the right address. And sometimes that information is on the reverse side of the mortgage statement. Sometimes it's online. But anyway, it's just something very important. And then if you send such a letter, make sure that you keep a copy of your letter and proof of mailing it, because they have a response time. And so when you send it is important to keep track of. All right, next slide, please. So I want to talk about the main mortgage assistance programs that we are aware of and work with. One is run by the state, the Georgia Homeowner Assistance Fund, and we call it HAF. This was authorized under the 2021 American Rescue Plan Act, which authorized $10 billion in this funding to be dispersed by Treasury to all states. Georgia was allocated $354 million. As of the end of last month, there's still a lot of money available. $109 million is still available. And so far, almost 10,000 Georgian homeowners have gotten assistance from this program. So there's still a lot of money available. Now, the purpose, of course, is to prevent homeowners from losing their homes. who are dealing with delinquencies, defaults, possibly facing foreclosure, but it does require that that person have experienced some kind of COVID-related financial hardship. So the Georgia Department of Community Affairs administers this program. That's who you apply to. That's who's overseeing it. The kind of programs they have, one is mortgage reinstatement. Someone's behind on their mortgage, and if they apply and qualify, then DCA will use half funds to catch up and reinstate the mortgage. There's also this principal curtailment. In some situations, they can, depending on the situation, this really applies to someone who has a permanent hardship, a permanent loss of income, then they can use the funds not just to catch up the arrears, but also to bring down that principal balance. And then the funds can potentially be used for other housing-related expenses, such as property taxes, homeowners insurance, or condo or HOA dues. Next slide, please. So what's the structure? And some of you have been around for a while. There was another assistance program called Home Safe that, where Georgia got federal money to help people who were in the foreclosure crisis, the subprime foreclosure crisis at that time, in the Great Recession. And that involved assistance where you had to sign basically a second mortgage. You didn't have to pay it back as long as you lived in the home for, at least another 5 years, but there was a second mortgage on your home and that would be canceled after 5 years. But in this situation, with this new HAF program, relatively new in recent years, there's a grant agreement that has to be signed, but there will not be a lien or second mortgage attached to the property. It's just a grant and you just have to sign it. And then the payments don't go to the homeowner. The payments go directly to the mortgage lender or servicer, or if you're paying property taxes or insurance company, it goes to those providers or the HOA or COA. The maximum amount of assistance is $50,000. You cannot get all of it. It depends on what you're qualifying for. But that's the maximum amount of assistance. And this is the website to access more information about that program. Next slide, please. So there's also a program for DeKalb. And as I mentioned earlier, Fulton does not have a mortgage assistance program that I'm aware of, but DeKalb does. And again, it's for people who've experienced some kind of COVID-related financial hardship. The target population are for those with an income of 80% of AMI or less. It's really designed and to prioritize seniors and people with disabilities. The home, of course, has to be located in DeKalb County. The owner has to, of course, own, or the person has to own and occupy the home as their primary residence. They need to have experienced some kind of financial hardship related to COVID, and there may be additional underwriting criteria. Next slide, please. And the kinds of assistance very similar to the state HAF program. There's mortgage reinstatement assistance, mortgage default resolution, limited mortgage payment assistance, and then some kind of property charge default resolutions, payment of property taxes, property insurance, or HOA dues. And again, this is a grant. It's not required to be paid back. There's no lien or anything attached to the property and the deed records, just like the HAF program. And it's administered by with DeKalb funds through Atlanta Legal Aid and our nonprofit partners, Our House Inc. and Atlanta Urban League. And the phone numbers are here. Next slide, please. So again, just going back as a reminder, I've gone over this, but I just want to go over it quickly again. If someone's at risk for foreclosure, life doesn't have to end. There are potential options, pay up the arrears, enter into a workout agreement, enter into some kind of refinance if that's possible, sell the home if necessary, file a lawsuit or file for bankruptcy protection. But there are ways to stop a potential foreclosure sale. Next slide, please. All right, so let me just address quickly what happens if someone's already foreclosed on. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, sometimes folks come to us very late in the game, and it's really difficult to handle those situations. But sometimes we're able to address them. Sometimes we're able to undo the foreclosure. Very difficult, but we have been able to do that. It really depends on the case. But what happens if that foreclosure sale goes through on Tuesday, September 3rd? Then the homeowner no longer owns the home. Whoever bought the home at the foreclosure sale, that's who the new owner is. And it used to be that, typically the mortgage company was going to be the entity that bought the home at the foreclosure sale. But these days, when property values have really gone up and mortgage balances are not so high in comparison to the property value, then investors are going to more likely buy the home at the foreclosure sale. So if someone's foreclosed on Tuesday, they don't own it. Whoever buys the home at the foreclosure sale, that's who own it. It might be a big institutional investor. It might be a small LLC. It might be an individual. But whoever it is, they now own the mortgage company. So what are the rights of the person who's been foreclosed on? What are their options? Sometimes they can negotiate cash for keys with the buyer and say, I need time to move. Please don't file a dispossessory against me. I need time to move and I'm planning to move. I just need time. And can you pay me? Now, these days, really, there's not a lot of financial incentive for an investor to pay cash for keys. This was more often an option in the days of the foreclosure crisis when property values were really low. But it's in theory, it might be an option in a particular situation. So it's worth potentially exploring with whoever the new owner is. Whoever owns after the foreclosure sale has the right to evict the person. And they cannot, on the day of the foreclosure or the day after, they cannot just throw them out on the street. They cannot do that. They are required to go through the process that Maggie Kinnear mentioned in her session earlier. Yeah, kind of treating them as a tenant. They have to go through that formal eviction process. So the mortgage company doesn't have to file a lawsuit in order to foreclose. There are these notice requirements. But once the foreclosure sale happens, then whoever then owns, they do have to go through a court process to evict the former homeowner. So they file the dispossessory warrant in court. The marshal will serve them, possibly by tack and mail or in person. As soon as they're served, they have 7 days to file an answer in court. It's not a lot of time. And then trial is going to be scheduled. And, pre-COVID, that the trial would happen within 7 days or so, or in 7 days or so. But these days, as Maggie mentioned, it might be 30 days before a hearing is set in Fulton. But it's not going to be a lot of time. And then go to court. As Maggie mentioned, if you don't go to court, then you can lose automatically. So you need to file the answer in court. Go to the hearing when you're supposed to go to the hearing. And if you lose, worst case scenario, then the judge will give you 7 days to move. So that's some time. It's not a lot of time. When folks come to us after a foreclosure sale, we're also going to be looking at other things. Well, wait a minute. Was the foreclosure sale done properly? And if there's some potential legal claim that the foreclosure sale was improper, invalid, then we would use that as a basis to try to undo the foreclosure sale. Very, very difficult to do. Have we done it many times? Yes. I've been here for 34 years, so I've been able to do that many times, but it's very rare. But it is potentially possible, so it's important. We really want people to come to us well in advance a foreclosure sale date because we have more time to work on a potential solution. But if someone comes to us after the fact, we still want to talk with them and then look at their situation. Is there anything that can be done? And maybe not, but if there's not, at least there's a court process and some time before they're required to move. All right, next slide, please. So here are some phone numbers. One, for people who are seniors, age 60 or older, we have a unit of Atlanta Legal Aid that's called Georgia Senior Legal Aid. And here is the phone number to call for seniors who are seeking free legal advice. So that's one phone number. The other phone number is for the unit that I work for, which is the specialized unit, the Home Defense Program of Legal Aid, where we help people who are homeowners or home buyers who are struggling with their mortgages or facing some kind of home scam. This is the phone number for reaching my unit. There's an intake process, and then, if the person's financially eligible, then they'll be able to talk with an attorney about their situation. I've also included the website for Atlanta Legal Aid. Maggie included it on her PowerPoint slides as well, and you can also apply for legal services online. Next slide, please. And so again, the website for Atlanta Legal Aid, and here Nadine mentioned this. Nadine provided a phone number, but there's also a website for people who are looking for a nonprofit HUD-certified housing counselor. This is a way to find them with this website. If you're aware of some kind of scam, then we encourage you to report it to the Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov. And I think that's the last slide I have. So with that, I hope that information was helpful. I think I saw some chatting going on. So if there are questions for me or questions for the rest of the team, please let me know.
Karen, in the chat box, Demetrius said I had to sue a mortgage company for an illegal mortgage sale of my mother's home.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. You want to share about what happened with that case?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes.
So they had a predatory system where they were taking homes from people who had recently passed, and they were sending letters to my mom's house. And of course, she was passed, so the letters were being rerouted. But they ended up performing an illegal mortgage sale because they created this mortgage that was attached to the house. So I cleared probate and everything, and there was no mortgage attached to it. So one day I came home for Christmas. It was last year. I came home for Christmas, and lo and behold, there were locks on the locks were changed. Everything. It was crazy. It was traumatic. It was literally like right after she passed.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that sounds horrible, and I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm not sure. I lost your sound, so I'm not sure if there was more to the story, but that reminds me this issue of people passing away.
can you hear me now?
That's something else that we help people with. So, remember I talked about if someone's behind on their mortgage, then they're supposed to get a letter. But if they've passed away and there's no one there, or the family's not, keeping track of the mail, then yeah, something like that can happen. It's horrible. And so, but one of the things that we do is that we work with surviving spouses or surviving adult children who are, for example, still living in the home.
I
And
wish
the
I knew about you
legal
guys.
work we can do to make sure that, and they may need to do probate. We may need to look at the deed records to see, well, did they inherit the house through, based on the language of the deed at issue, or is there a will, or do they need to file for probate, et cetera, et cetera. There are federal laws that say, if they provide documentation showing I inherited the home, and here's the paperwork, here's the death certificate, here's the paperwork showing I inherited the home. The mortgage company used to just say, we're not going to talk to you. You're not the borrower. But there's federal law where we can show that this person is what we call a successor in interest, and they should be treated like the borrower. And then the mortgage company is supposed to talk with them and offer them whatever kind of loss mitigation options they would offer the borrower who passed. So there are some federal protections that are available these days that didn't used to be available. I'm really sorry that happened to you and your family.
Yes.
But I hope you mentioned that you file a lawsuit, and I hope you're getting help with that. But there are legal rights available for people who are heirs.
Oh yeah, we ended up they ended up following through it because it was air property, like you said, and we ended up suing and winning because it was predatory and they didn't have anything to really stand on. It went through 8 different sales within a month and a half.
Well, so it sounds like you were successful in your.
Oh yeah.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. But thanks for bringing that up because it's a reminder about these other issues when there's heir property, because we want, we want that property to go to the family, go to the surviving spouse, go to the adult, children. We want that, generational wealth to pass on. All right. Are there other questions? Looks like someone has their hand raised.
Yes. Lester Leslie?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me.
Oh, now we can. You
Can
were
you
a
hear?
little staticky at first. We can hear you.
Okay, yes. Yes, hi. I live in an area where homes are skyrocketing. I mean, really skyrocketing. Average cost of a house is about $350 to $400,000. And when we purchased our house, we only paid $80,000. We want to go ahead and reduce our property taxes because the property taxes have increased tremendously. And we have builders that are coming in from California and building these humongous houses. The house that we live in was built back in 1965. And so it's all brick. And the new houses that they're building are so much bigger. And so, we went ahead and we sent an appeal for the assessed value of our home, which is a certain percentage. And we just received the information today. We just want to go ahead and see what can we do to reduce the property taxes on our house.
Okay, well, thanks for coming. So for raising that, that was not a topic that we covered in today's session. And I think there might be other sessions that are done to address this, but you're right that there are appeal rights. Everybody who's a homeowner receives a notice, an annual notice of assessment. And I think City of Atlanta, Fulton County received them in maybe May, and you have 45 days from the date it was of the notice to file an appeal. And it sounds like you filed an appeal. And when you file an appeal, we encourage you, you want to, show the difference between, your home, as you've described, and the other homes in your area. But you also want to, most important, find homes that are like your homes that sold last year in 2023, that are closer to the value of your home, that are close in size, that are close in condition, that have similar features. So you want to show your home is more like those than these others. And then you might look at other properties that are assessed in your neighborhood that have a more reasonable rate and say, my home is closer and more similar to that. So you've got to show that comparison. So I'm not sure whatever you received today, but usually there's a process, and you can go to a hearing, and I think you have the option of going to the Board of Equalization or anyway, I'm not exactly positive about all the different steps, but there is an appeal process, and I encourage you to do that. The other thing to do is to apply for all homestead exemptions for which you may be eligible. The goal is to try to reduce your property taxes. One is to see if you can reduce the value of the home according to the tax office, the tax assessor's office. And the other is to apply, make sure you own the home, you live in it, make sure that you have the homestead exemption. And then look at all of the homestead exemptions that are potentially available. And for people who are seniors, limited income, veterans, there are all different kinds of homestead exemptions in different categories that you should look at and see if you can apply for those. And if you apply, you need to apply by April 1st every year. It's too late to apply now to affect your 2024 tax bill, but you can apply now or at least by April 1st next year. And that, if you're approved, should impact and help reduce your 2025 tax bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, Karen and everyone. Demetrius reminded me of something, and that is the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority, FANS, and that is a filing activity notification system. And it's a voluntary system designed to send you an electronic notification of the filing and of a document and select official county records. Basically, it sends you a notice if someone appears to be looking at your property or trying to tamper with it. We're hearing a lot of things on the news about how people are stealing property. I put in the chat that uh, not the email address, but the link to that program. And if you have a mortgage or if you have a home without a mortgage, you really need to sign up for FANS. I love to say FANS, the Filing Activity Notification System. Let me give you an example. I did this in our church, and there was a young lady, and she has a very common name. Her name is Pat Martin. And so she called me and she said, I want to let you know somebody's trying to take my mortgage, take my house. And I said, well, what are they saying? Well, I went in and looked and realized another Patricia Martin had just purchased a home, but it made her conscious. And I think I've told you this story before, Karen. It made her conscious of the fact that someone could be looking at her property. If you have property, please try to register, and it's a voluntary system. Register your property under the FANS program. So it is in the website, it is in the chat box.
Are there any other questions for me or Nadine or Maggie? Please let us know. We are here.
It looks like we have all our questions in, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you so much to our wonderful presenters. Let me see what's coming into the chat here. Oh, great, some accolades. Thank you. We really appreciated the time that you took to present on this topic to us and your expertise, Nadine, Maggie, and Karen. Everyone, just a reminder that we do send out a follow-up email. You'll get a survey link, a link to a survey to give us feedback on that. We really value your input on these courses, and it helps us continue to deliver meaningful content to everyone. And I'm just going to share with you a couple upcoming classes that we have, and then we'll go ahead and say good night. Can everyone see my screen there?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So I won't read through the whole list, but I'll highlight the few in-person courses that we do have coming up. The Bridging Generations, which is a multi-generational panel on the topic of community and civic engagement in Atlanta. That's coming up on Wednesday, September 18th. Our Atlanta Community Engagement Playbook course, which covers the topics that are enclosed in the Atlanta Community Engagement Playbook. That's a very popular course that's on Saturday, September 21st. And then those are all of our upcoming in-person classes. We continue to celebrate the 50th anniversary year of the neighborhood planning unit system. So with that, you'll be hearing more about an upcoming neighborhood festival, or Love Thy Neighbor Festival in November. And really, if you track us on mpuatlanta.org, you can find out about any other upcoming events as well. Thanks again for everyone. Make sure you follow us on social media to just like stay updated on all of the happenings with the MPU team, course offerings, events that are coming up. and other opportunities to learn and connect. If no one has any other questions, we will say good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Great.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you for having us, and good luck to everybody.
Yes, thank you. Good luck.
Thanks
Take
so
care.
much.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.